going to get into the panel discussion with some audience Q&A, and then wrap up and close. And thanks so much to our sponsors who played, our sponsors and partners in this work, United Way of Washtenaw County, as well as U of M Ginsburg Center. So while we're here, I talked a little bit about this, but just to see it in front of you, to uplift stories from local people of color. Although we're going to provide some context at the global national level, there's also an opportunity to really localize this work about what's happening in Washtenaw County. So all of the voices that you'll be hearing from today are people who work, play, and live in that space. We want to build resiliency around the nonprofit ecosystem, foster network connectedness, make space for conversations that center justice and equity. And then to imagine what transformative solutions may look like. So we bring all of that into this space, and we encourage people to think radically. We encourage people to, think creatively as we think about how we can move, forward dealing with this crisis. So these are some of the norms that we want to bring into the space. Just ask you to make note of them. In particular, just, welcoming children and pets, or, any distractions that may happen in or around us, that's going to happen. And I think also just to, secondly, practice deep listening here and with us. And we actually should just lean into this moment, be present, try to remove any distractions that are around you, not check email, etc., but just listen to the stories that are being offered, the perspective that's being shared, the vulnerableness that's being expressed. And then from there, as we move into this conversation, with the theme of this conversation to being around what's the new normal, and when we say the new normal, that can be either on an individual level, that could be from an organizational level, that can be from a community level, and we bring that into this space. And one of the reasons that we thought this theme was so timely is realizing that there's really a tale of two cities that's happening across the US, where there are a number of cities, states, communities that are starting to move towards reopening and grappling with what that looks like. And then on the other side of that, in the other state, you have states that are still in lockdown. Here in Michigan, we're on lockdown until the end of the month, right? And so thought this was a great conversation to bring into this space around, what's the opportunity here? What are the things that, we should be considering as we grapple with this question? How do we, and you all have, started to express what some of the questions that's on your mind. And we have invited a really exciting group of panelists to talk a little bit more about what is some of the opportunities to either think, differently about this approach, to further our thoughts when it comes to it, or how can we, just go about taking even radical steps in a way that just doesn't rely on the old normal, but instead create this new normal for us that embraces the opportunity that lies at our feet. So with that being said, I just want to quickly, introduce this amazing group of panelists that we have. And I'm going to start with Mohit Nagpal. And Mo, would you take just a couple of seconds to introduce yourself and say a few words about you?
Sure, Mel. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohit Nagpal. I usually go by Mo. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the son of two refugee parents that were forced to become part of a new normal as children during the partition of countries in the Indian subcontinent in the 40s. And as a first-gen US immigrant myself, I also got the opportunity of adapting to the new Western normal and a real-world education in the Deep South in the 80s and the 90s. I also got acclimated to the growth mindset norms, the career in the tech sector for 25 plus years. And eventually, but inevitably made the decision to live the norms of the real arena here in the nonprofit and the social sector. As you can probably tell, I live at the intersectionality of the East and West, global North and the South, and boardrooms and frontline essential migrant workers. I'm really happy to be here today and seeing many of you, even though it's virtual. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mo. Super excited to have you be here and be a part of the conversation. let's go over to, local storyteller, lecturer, all around word master, LaRon Williams.
Hello, everybody. I'm LaRon Williams. I grew up in Flint, but I've been a just about 50-year resident of Ann Arbor, and actually more than 50 years if you count the county. I lived in Ypsilanti for a short time. And I have, for most of my adult life, been involved in social justice causes of various kinds. As Melvin said, I make my living as a professional storyteller, but I also travel around the country doing lectures on creating inclusive communities, particularly helping people to explore what I call what it is they don't see that they don't see, to break through certain kinds of blocks that prevent us from achieving diverse communities. And I love my job, I love my work, and I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks so much, LaRon. We're happy to have you as well. Let's go to Payton, who's involved at so many different levels across Washtenaw County, and brings such a great energy to the space. Payton, would you like to say a couple words about yourself?
Hey, yeah, is my audio coming through clean?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. I really just want to express my gratitude to everyone on this organizing panel here today. For those that don't know, New Center was putting on Champions of Change cohort. I don't want to get too long-winded, but I do want to express my excitement to be sharing this space once again with Mo, LaRon, and everyone else who helped facilitate our cohort. It was really amazing and unfortunately cut short because of COVID-19. So this is really beautiful and gives me a lot of excitement and hope for the world right now. So I really want to express that. My name is Payton. I use he and they pronouns. I'm a 26-year-old community organizer and anarchist. I've been an anarchist organizer for most of my adult life. I've traveled the country as a teacher. I spent a year traveling with the group called Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. We're a nationwide network of people responding to not only the disasters that are natural, but the disasters of capitalism, patriarchy, and settler colonialism. So we spent a year teaching people in their communities and listening to their stories about how they respond to disasters. I've taken that sort of work back here in Ypsilanti, where I live, and helped co-found the Mutual Aid Network of Ypsilanti, which I will talk about later.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Payton. And then last but certainly not least, Lori Saginaw, who's activist, seeker, deep listener, all around just amazing human being. Would just like to welcome you into this space and invite you to say a couple of words.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to introduce myself in a way that I learned from a woman who really taught me the importance of ancestry. So she began by going back as far as she could. And I'll start by saying I'm the granddaughter of 4 Japanese immigrants who were forcibly incarcerated by this government and put into prison camps due to a presidential executive order in 1943. I'm also the daughter of 2 American citizens who were incarcerated with their parents in spite of their citizenship. I am the soulmate and partner in a long marriage. I am the mom of 2 artist activists. I am a discipline disciple of dialogue, and I use she and her pronouns.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lori. Extremely excited to have all of you all assembled today, and really, excited to hear what you all have prepared and to share with the broader conversation. I see there's a couple of questions that came up in the chat box. So I just want to announce them for the broader group. Yes, we will share this slide deck with you all, along with a number of the resources and things that are mentioned. That will come in a separate email. There's another person that's a part of this internal team, Ananya Mainuka, who's been like just an awesome team player and will help to deliver on all of those things as well. So yes, all of those things will be coming your way following this conversation today. All right, so with that being said, just wanted to just offer, you know, this quote that I pulled out from this this conversation that I was reading around, you know, as we move back to this new normal, kind of like what's at stake here. What are all of, you know, what are some of the things from a health aspect that people need to be considering, you know, from social distancing, from organizations, from communities, et cetera. And like, how does that have an impact on how we're going? And I would say even in the state of Michigan, there's really interesting, you know, dichotomies that are forming where you have protesters taking, you know, storming the Capitol in Lansing to, you know, to be demand from this public health crisis that's happening, where you have people in the city of Detroit who have some of the highest infection rates as well as dying rates happening in the country. And so with that being said, I just wanted to offer this piece that came from the New Yorker, in which it says the most dangerous illusion one can have in a pandemic is that it is only happening to other people someplace else. And I just invite us to sit with that for a moment as we think about, you know, how we show up in this space, all of the different intersectionalities that we sit at, you know, et cetera. And as we reflect on that, you know, how it may have an impact on when we think of the pandemic and what's at stake here. You know, and so as we move on from that, we started to see how some states have already started reopening. This is a graphic that was pulled from yesterday around kind of what states are doing. So you'll see states in orange, you know, represent about half that are still in lockdown, with you know, about a third of states kind of moving towards lockdown, winding down, or partially reopening. And so that gives you a sense of, you know, as a country, kind of how there's so many different approaches to reopening and what that returning back to normal may look like, and even taking into account all of the different motivations that have been mentioned, you know, primarily being around the economic impact, and then, you know, sometimes being offered around the health impact, et cetera. And I think, you know, even for you, and I'm sure a number of other organizations are thinking about, you know, what does returning to work in an office look like? You know, how do we embrace social distancing? How do we embrace, you know, clean hygiene? How do we embrace all of these other things that may be introduced in order to still deliver on our mission and things that are important to us? You know, and then also in that space, we realize it's not just returning to work, but like, how do we kind of pivot or embrace the opportunity that lays before us around, you know, rebuilding? How do we reclaim, you know, the space that we were in, or how the shifting or need, or how can we, you know, really reset and reimagine the opportunity that's there? I can say, at least for new, you know, we hadn't fully embraced virtual learning, you know, virtual offerings before, and now we're all in into this work. So, you know, how these different examples present themselves in order to still be engaged with the audience, to still be engaged with the communities that are important to you, and then to still move forward in a way that either, you know, embraces new opportunities, or kind of shifts away from things that weren't working in the past that were wrapped up in that normal, to kind of moving towards a new normal. And so those are all of the kind of different things that our panelists are going to talk about, and we invite those into this space. And I think the last thing that we wanted to share is when we talk about the concept of normal, when you like of an old normal, and that inherently kind of acknowledges like all of the things that we accepted, you know, whether it's around all of the inequities that existed, all of the fact that, you know, teachers and school children didn't have access to hardware, or didn't have access to internet access, that people weren't being, you know, clothed and fed, et cetera. All of that was wrapped in an old normal that we accepted. But now as we move back to this new normal, what are we going to accept and what are we not going to accept? You know, realizing how people have responded, how other folks have kind of shown up in this space, how immediate needs have been met, how stimulus checks have been released, et cetera. And so how do we grapple with those two decisions that are there? And with that, I offer this quote that was pulled from a really great article on the Think Global Health website, is that it's tempting to wonder when things will return to normal. But the fact is that they won't, not in the old normal anyway, but we can achieve a new kind of normality, even if this brave new world differs in fundamental ways. And so what is going to happen is that we're going to invite our panelists to talk about, you know, that opportunity around the brave new world and differing in fundamental ways. And with that being said, I want to hop over to Mo to kind of share, you know, his perspective when it comes to, excuse me, what returning may look like, what his thoughts on what returning to work may look like. And Mo, I'd love to hear your response to that.
Thank you, Mel. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I know I might be cutting in and out because I've got several of my family here on Zoom calls at the same time. But thanks for the opportunity. And as a longtime Ann Arbor resident myself, I'm passionate about social justice and equity in our community here in Washington County, as well as in Detroit. I came to this discussion with a very different perspective, kind of with a shield to separate the personal from the professional. And the new center team guided me gently to talk more about personal stories and not do a formal slide presentation. I can say that initially made me a little uncomfortable, and I'm a bit nervous now, but hopefully you can bear with me as I try to do this. So with that said, I'll take you on a short journey on what my experience has been and some of my learnings, and invite you to open your minds as individuals, as organizational leaders, as community members, as well as global of our only planet, glean insights that may help you shape your new normal along those interconnected dimensions. So at a personal level, I never really thought I'd be struggling to find ways to get groceries and critical cleaning supplies to my home for a member that has a low immunity and cannot be exposed to too much contamination, or that my son would be stuck in another state on the East Coast as the lockdowns make it difficult to drive across many state borders, and we would have to celebrate his graduation this weekend virtually, that all the jobs in his field would be impossible to perform as a performing arts major in the foreseeable future, or that my wife would be so busy teaching elementary, middle, and high school Spanish over Zoom to several hundred students that I'll be doing the cooking and dishes, or that I'll be fattening, I meant to say flattening my belly curves by sitting in front of a computer all day. I know that my personal new normal will not involve working out in a gym for a while, or meeting friends in person and having get-togethers and birthday celebrations with song and dance, as is the tradition with both the Indian and Latin communities that I interact with. But I do hope that my personal normal is a new set of hobbies that I would have tried, maybe a renewed set of relationships that would have otherwise languished, a much more compassionate attitude that prioritizes the truly important needs of family, friends, neighbors, and others that I interact with. My organization, like many others, is looking at a phased approach to opening up. For all of us, I think this is a great time to think about our own organizational histories. What was your organization's founding story? What was the original vision? What are and were its values, and how have they changed? I think sustaining business operations while keeping people calm and safe and productive during this crisis is a daunting task. But clearly identifying what we value can help us and our organizations align to that proverbial North Star. We're now in a necessary period, I think, of taking stock of what's worked and what has not in our systems of governance and capitalism. It's this kind of pain that is inherent in transformation as when perhaps a caterpillar dies itself, but eventually emerges as a butterfly. The difference, I think, is that ours has to be a conscious process. We have to choose to evolve. What if we adopted perhaps a conscientious or even a compassionate capitalism as our operating framework for our organization? Indeed, that's my hope for the new normal for organizations, conscious capitalism, a term coined by John Mackey and Raj Sisodia in their seminal book with that name. Some of you may already know this. The 4 tenets include demonstrating what it means to have a purpose beyond profit, cultivating conscientious leadership, focusing on long-termism and prioritizing all stakeholders, and creating a culture of trust, love, and caring. I had the privilege of leading one such social enterprise as their COO in my work in a half a dozen countries across North, Central, and South America, and proved that we could not only have life-changing impact, but also consistent returns on our investors' capital by lending to the poor indigenous women at the bottom of the economic pyramid with a model that is based on group accountability alone. No collateral, no formal contracts, just their word, and a dream to create a better living condition for their families. My hope is that organizations can become a healing force for the people that work there, the customers that buy there, and communities that live around us. And I sincerely believe it's all about people. It always has been, and it always will be about people. In trying to shape my community's new normal, the words of Richard Rohr come to mind. He says, the secret to community lies in the way we let other people get through to us and the way we move out of ourselves. When a person on a serious inner journey to their own vulnerability is also in immediate contact with the vulnerability of the world, then some form of community is almost always the result. As the Latino migrant farm communities that have consistently been responsible for putting food on our tables grapple with feeding their own families in this COVID world, I hope the new normal is a liberation to an equitable and sustainable future state, building bridges across race, gender, socioeconomic, religious differences, closing the food, education, and healthcare gaps. That creating physical distance from others can be an authentic way to care for our neighbors, especially the most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, and the poor. As a recent member of the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation Glacier Hills Fund, I was glad to be part of carving out a 6-figure amount to be allocated to supporting emergency services like Meals on Wheels for the older adults in our community. If you have a need for support services for the aging in our community, please do contact me right away. While there's no guarantee that we'll make collective community choices, the prospects are greatly enhanced as we engage in active public dialogue like this on options before us and make our choices with informed awareness of the consequences. I hope that in this new normal, to interact in our communities and finding solutions is the way forward. What about the global new normal? Will the COVID pandemic bring a brutal end to the second age of globalization, just like World War I brought about the first? How about Davos? Sound familiar to anyone, perhaps? Would it eventually become a quaint word, perhaps like Esperanto, as national interests and economic nationalism come roaring back? Today's crisis may explode and wipe out old inefficient models like perhaps that box store or retail malls or unproductive but socially alluring office spaces, perhaps even the cartelized price fixing, all producing alliances. post-pandemic world will have no choice, I believe, but to contend at last with a problem long in the making, the awful dilemma of global integration without solidarity. Maybe the silver lining from this virus that has forced us to distance ourselves from each other can be one that forces us to realize how interdependent we are on each other. Let's shape the new world order we love with love, joy, courage, and optimism. Like they say, never let a crisis go waste. Thank you for listening to me, and please take care.
Thank you so much, Mo. There was so many gems and stuff that you had offered and shared in there. And so, yeah, I appreciate you, sharing. There was, someone that commented, around just appreciation for also being away from their sibling, or so not siblings, their children, and kind of just like how they're managing that space. And I just appreciate the other, things that you offered in your sharing. So thank you so much. So I'm going to now go to our next speaker, LaRon Williams. And LaRon, would love to hear how some of the things that came up as you were considering that question about what's the new normal, or how to prepare for the new normal. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Melvin. So I've got a few things in my mind before I start. Somebody used the phrase "a tale of two cities." I don't know who it was, but this is a tale of many points of view, let's say, So what I want to try to do is present a couple of points of view and then talk about the direction forward given those primary points of view. So people know that I make my living as a professional storyteller. I told you a minute ago. And so I want to start out with a little a snippet, a piece of a thing that I do that is intended to introduce the notion of cultures and stories. And some of you have heard this before, so bear with me. A lot of people won't have heard it. A long time ago, when the first Africans were coming to this part of the world, they did not come here as people who carried 2 big stacks of books and a couple of packed suitcases. They came here as people who were caught, captured, kidnapped, sold, or otherwise cajoled into one of the worst systems of slavery that the world has ever seen. They rode over here in the bottoms of slave ships, jammed together like sardines in a can, forced to eat, sleep, and live for months at a time in their own body wastes. And when those Africans got here, an attempt was made to try to completely dehumanize them, to strip them of any vestige of culture. The process was called seasoning. There was an attempt to turn them into slaves. But those Africans fought back. They didn't have anything outside of themselves with which to fight back. They fought back with what was inside of them, their memories of who they used to be, their strong belief in who they could be again, and they created a new kind of culture, blended together with the old world cultures wherever they found themselves. And that culture became their way of survival. It was a culture that was built on caring, sharing, and helping each other. That's the culture that I was raised in. We were taught to value each other. We were taught to think of ourselves as a community. We were taught to think of the greatest responsibility we had was to give back something positive to the community that had given life to us. I was soaked in that communal kind of culture. One of my strongest mentors and idols was my 5th grade teacher, Miss Montgomery. I remember on the very first day of class, she had all the students line up and she took our shoes off and looked at our socks and tried to discern whether we had, new socks, old socks, holes in our socks, whatever. Now, she explained later that the point was not that she was the inspector of socks, but that she wanted us to be so concerned about what we were that we would even pay attention to the tiniest little thing like our socks, the socks that we wore. She said she didn't just want us to be good students, she wanted us to be impeccable human beings. That was the first time I'd ever heard that word. And obviously it has stuck with me even to this day. It was a culture that I grew up in. Now, that's one point of view. On the other side of the coin is the culture that I discovered when I became a storyteller. I did a TED Talk a few years ago, and in that TED Talk, I talked about how there was a need for us to create new stories for the 21st century times that we lived in. I talked about how after maybe about 15 years as a storyteller, I began to see that there were certain kinds of patterns, certain common values in a huge number of stories that I was reading in books and I was hearing at festivals and so on. And those values are things like that human beings can be arranged hierarchically, that we should have punitive relationships with those people who do wrong, punish them, that we can think that we should be afraid of each other, especially those of us who don't look the same, that we should be individualistic and very selfish. Those were very common values that I saw repeated over and over and over again in stories. Now, those values obviously were in conflict with the values of my childhood. They weren't what I came to call Kwanzaa values or Ubuntu values, and I'll come back to that in a little while if you don't know what Ubuntu is. They weren't my Ubuntu values. They were common values. Okay, we've got two opposing points of view. Now, I grew up in Flint, about a half block from some railroad tracks. And I know a lot of you have heard that phrase, living on the wrong side of the tracks. Well, I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I lived in a house that when the train went by, it would shake the house because we were that close. I have a brother who still lives in that same house that we grew up in. He and I have very different lives, very different lives. I live in Ann Arbor. I'm able to be a part of this discussion because I have a nice computer, and even though I don't know very much about it, I at least know enough that I can be here. But my brother doesn't have a computer at all, doesn't know the first thing about computers. He also has diabetes, he has high blood pressure, and he has asthma. I personally don't know a single person, anybody close, who has even come down with COVID-19. But my brother, when I talk to him on the phone, he gives me a running tally of all the people he knows who have died. I live in a relatively nice neighborhood with a nice pond nearby. And several times during the course of the week, I go out, I take walks over near the nice pond. And one of the things I've noticed on my walks is that people are starting to wave now. Everybody waves at everybody else. Everybody. Even tiny little children who are wandering around on their own will wave at me when I pass by. Now, I think that's because of a couple of things. I think, first of all, that we're tremendously relieved to have an opportunity to share closeness and to get rid of even a little bit of the alienation that our society sort of gives to us. And I also think that we need each other more than we need what one of those points of view tries to offer us. So remember, I said there are 2 points of view. One of those points of view tries to tell us that the big screen TV is what we live for. It's not human relationships. It's not people that matter the most. It's what you can get, what you can attain. It's money. It's objects. So people are talking about getting back to normal, returning to normal. And I ask, whose normal are we going to talk about? Whose normal are we going to extol? Many people have identified in the writing that you read as intro to this program, we identified that the normal pre-COVID-19 was ravaging the lives of lots of people. Those are people like my brother. And I don't want to return to that normal. I don't believe that any of us should want to return to that normal. I watched a video not too long ago. It was a video, Naomi Klein was the featured person in the video. And to start out the video, she ran a segment, a quote by the economist Milton Friedman. And I have it on my computer here. Milton Friedman says that only crises produce, or every crisis produces rapid change. The path that we will follow during those crises will depend upon the stories we hear, the stories of what's lying around. The stories that are lying around, excuse me. On the one hand, we've got the story about things being more important. On the other hand, we've got the story about human relationships, the caring, sharing, helping community that I grew up in. We have the option for humanist values, behavior that supports human life, that places people above and before the things that people produce. So I wonder, what is the value of human life? Not just here in this country, but worldwide. How should we spend our time? Not just here, but worldwide. What should we be doing? Do we need to be working as often as we do, as much as we do? Should we penalize people who are quote unquote jobless? We call it that, even though there's a surplus of the stuff that we've made. We've gone beyond the point where we're simply supplying what we need. We're supplying what advertising says that we should want. Top-down solutions won't work. The issues that we face, the issue we face is a crisis within a crisis. This pandemic is taking place within a massive setup of inequity that's been around for hundreds of years. And power at the top relies on those inequities to maintain itself. My fear is what I'm going to call here the danger of the wrong story. The danger that our desire to return to normal will move us in the wrong direction and make us more susceptible to manipulation. It will cause us to present fewer alternatives to what's out there. It'll silence us. It'll make us turn against each other. So the question is, how do we get out the other story, the human story? And thank goodness a lot of you are talking about how to do that too. We're already doing it. But also, I was told that we're supposed to present a kind of an ask here in the middle of our presentation. So the ask that I want to put out is one that exists inside of me. It's like a dilemma for me. So you all can help me with this. I want my life to function smoothly again. I want to be able to make plans. In fact, I already did make plans to have my house recarpeted, to have my walls repainted. You know, I want a new washer, I want a new dryer. But I too will be happy to return to normal. Or I should say, and I too will be happy to return to normal, even though in my heart I detest the normal that life has been. This situation has made me painfully aware of the distinction between my life, the way I live my life, and the life of my brother. I'm painfully aware of my own class privilege, and how much, even though in my deepest guts I want to get rid of this inequity, I also want to hold on to the old way. So my ask is not about specifics, not about how to feed hungry people or provide housing for people who've been evicted. Those things are tremendously important, but I want to know if I'm willing to go further than simply being helpful. If I'm willing to go to the point where maybe I'll have to give up some of my personal comfort or my personal dreams of my own version of wealth in order to see the creation of a new kind of society. How far am I willing to go?
Hey, LaRon, that's great. Finish up your last thought just so we can move on to our next.
I'm going to end on a quote by Layla Saad, who just published a book. She says, "Will I show up for myself and for others from a place of fear and scarcity, two things that white supremacy uses to keep those with white privilege in inaction towards anti-racism, Or will I show up from a place of love and courage, two things that every good ancestor throughout history has shown us is needed in order to help humanity to not only survive, but also to thrive?
Thank you for that, Laurent. Would you be able to type that into the chat box to share with the group? If you're comfortable, do that. If not, we'll share it in the notes with people later on.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you so much, Laurent. There's so many like nuggets and stuff that was there. I think one of the ones in particular is, asking that question about how much further am I willing to go beyond just being helpful, or acknowledging, where we are now, but what's the opportunity to do things differently. And so with that being said, I'm going to invite in our next speaker, Payton, who is one of those people who I feel like is operating differently in the current space. And he was doing it pre-COVID, and something that has only gone to the next level. So Payton, can you share a little bit about, some of the things that you're involved in, and kind of also responding to that prompt?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. Is my audio still coming through clean?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I absolutely want to uplift what Laurent just said. It's always a treat hearing his stories. And to the theme of inviting ancestors, I would like to, before I speak, recognize that right now, a lot of things are coming up in me. I am feeling a lot of rage. I'm feeling a lot of sadness and loss. I'm feeling a lot of confusion. I'm at the same time feeling a lot of righteous indignation, happiness, excitement, and anticipation for what I believe is on the horizon. There's beautiful experiments happening all over the world and here in Washtenaw County. And at the same time, there's a lot of resistance against those worlds. And so right now, I want to make that space. If everyone could, we've kind of been, charging through this, take a deep breath in. And release that. Like I said, please bear with me right now. I'm feeling a lot of things. I would like to also offer from they're the Anti-Oppressive Resource and Training Alliance, AORTA. They have a really amazing list of facilitation guides that I like to recite as mantras. One is expect and respect a lack of closure. We won't find closure, like Yodit was saying at the very beginning of this conversation. The other is not all of us can be articulate all of the time. And so I really want to have that grace in this conversation as well. I also want to challenge, despite the fact that I love you dearly, Mo, conscious capitalism. I do not think that that is a responsible thing for us to be talking about in today's day and age. We're living in late stage capitalism, and it has ravaged and destroyed large swaths of the planet. The evolution from feudalism, the monarchical system in Europe, to capitalism was one that caused incredible genocide, pillaging, and slavery, the slavery that Laurent was describing of my people and people all over this world. I do not think that capitalism can be remediated. I think it needs to be composted and destroyed ultimately. And I will talk about this in some of the examples that I've been asked to share today. Laurent ended with Naomi Klein's talk about disaster capitalism, and this is a sort of a global pandemic that in the wake of disasters, whether they be natural disasters or economic, political, or biological disasters like the one that we're facing right now at the global level, opportunists from the corporate, military, industrial, and even the nonprofit sectors will do everything that they can to seize their white supremacist settler colonial control over the planet. And this comes from a capitalist modality. So I wanna emphasize that at the global level, we need to be thinking about these things. And one amazing example right now of communities that were organizing before COVID-19, long before, and are continuing to organize now, are the free autonomous communes in northern Syria. I have a list of resources that I right now am linking into the chat if you want to follow along. It's a sort of bibliography for me. Most of the things that I'm citing in this conversation are going to be found in this list of resources. My 3 asks are also attached here as well, and you can read those too. In northern Syria, the Kurdish people had been fighting for thousands of years against the Ottoman Empire and other hegemonic rulers. Today they fight against the Turkish state, against ISIS, against the Iraqi government, the Syrian government. They're indigenous people who have been fighting for their lands and for their freedom. And they've adapted their modality to one that is feminist, ecological, and revolutionary through direct democracy. I have an amazing documentary that I listed under my list of resources called The Communes of Rojava. I highly recommend looking at this. It describes how they build their committees that are neighborhood by neighborhood, house by house, directly democratic, not representative democracy, which is an oxymoron, but one that is controlled by consensus by the people on a small bioregional scale. This is, I believe, the world that we could be moving into, and this is the world that the mutual aid network of Ypsilanti is hoping to seed and foster along with our partners and comrades here on the ground in Washtenaw County today. So looking at these large-scale examples, I highly recommend you to watch the Communes of Rojava documentary. I can't spend too much of my time right now talking about them, although I wish I could. We garner that inspiration from their model, which is once again born from thousands of years of resistance. As a colonial inhabitant in these lands, understanding that the Navajo Nation and other indigenous nations right now are being more widely affected, along with Black and brown communities in this country. Myself being African American, I understand the weight of what it means to be living under 400, 500 years of apartheid and genocide in a slavery state. Slavery still exists in this country in the prison industrial complex. Understanding these things, we have to reconfigure our society. As Laurent said, there is no going back. We're never going to go back to normal. And that entire notion, going back to normal, right, means that we're regressing. Rather, why are the conversations then not pointed in the direction of moving forward? What is on the horizon? We have to decide this. It is either towards more global totalitarian fascism or an egalitarian society that's directly democratic and participatory and accessible. I would like to say that in the Mutual Aid Network of Ypsilanti, the work that we're doing is through the guise of a worker self-directed nonprofit. We got incorporated last year, long before we had any idea that COVID-19 was going to happen. We decided that we wanted to take inspiration from the Kurdish communes, from our comrades in southern Mexico, the Zapatistas. We were inspired by the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and other revolutionary organizations that in the past and to continue to today have been fighting for liberation, autonomy, sovereignty, and direct participation in a world society that's not governed by capital, that isn't governed by patriarchy or by a meritocracy, but is governed by our mutual affinity and care for each other. And so thinking about this, we created these 3 programs. One is the Pass It On program, where we have been collecting from local big box stores and small stores alike, home goods, cleaning supplies, and other necessary items that oftentimes get destroyed, leaning into the model that food gatherers had been using for 30 years to collect food and redistribute it. We were doing retail redistribution. And it's been very successful, and we've been able to partner with local food pantries and hospitality centers and autonomous hospitality spaces to redistribute these supplies really equitably in our community through relationship-based networks, not this sort of top-down advocacy. Once again, we're a worker self-directed nonprofit. That means that all of the committees and all of the work that we're doing, all of our programs are directed by the workers, which are the people. We don't have a board of directors that are white, affluent, and removed from the work that we're doing. Our board of directors are us, the people, and we're empowering people to make the decisions for themselves to be able to advance equity as they see fit, not ask for permission, not ask for advocacy from some top-down hegemonic organization. Instead, we've created configurations that are mutualistic. Mutual aid, what is that? That's a term that's been blowing up a lot lately. I'm running out of time here, I'm sorry. And I think that in this wellspring of mutual aid, the term at least being used, I get skeptical because I think that mutual aid is not just this sort of people helping people because it's a nice thing to do sort of activity, but because it's an act of resistance against the current forms that we've been living through, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, etc. And it's an act of resistance into, an invitation into a new world that we can devise that is directly democratic, participatory, and accessible, ecologically informed. And so mutual aid isn't just this tit for tat exchange, I help you, you help me sort of thing, but it's a solidarity horizontal. That means shoulder to shoulder approach. So when it comes to, are we going to go back to work right now? Creating these mutual aid networks, like the mutual aid network of Ypsilanti, I think is incredibly important, not because we need to have some sort of administrative body that's going to be telling the people how they're going to be liberated and what world they're going to be moving into, but the people themselves are devising these forms and conditions to be able to move into that world by their own grace. We can liberate ourselves from CEOs, we can liberate ourselves from masters of all varieties. We don't need professionals to tell us how to do things because we, the people, are professionalized. We can extend our, and if you watch the Communes of Rojava documentary, we can extend professionalization and skill into the collective neighborhoods that we're living in. We don't need to have people who are presiding over us in city councils, et cetera, to tell us how to self-govern. And so I really want to emphasize as my final point here, because I could continue to talk about this for ad nauseum, that my three basic demands or asks are to refocus money and organizing energy beyond Ann Arbor. I cite that large Ann Arbor-based nonprofits historically centralize a majority of the donor wealth of Washtenaw County. The Mutual Aid Network of Ypsilanti has recently been able to, through the United Way, act as a fiscal sponsor to a local mutual aid resources group. As a nonprofit, we have that ability and privilege to be able to exercise. And so we're using that to help people who are doing on the ground work as well. We just secured $20,000, and we ourselves have a fundraiser that I've listed in my demands to look at so that we can continue to sustain our efforts here on the ground within our programs. Advanced worker self-determination. I will not talk about that right now. I highly suggest you read the resources that I have if you're interested in supporting working class people. And my last is to read and watch this list of resources that I have below. In my links, I have some really amazing, well-curated pieces of multimedia that I really hope that people dig into. My last point here that I would really like to emphasize is that, once again, mutual aid is not something that is just a nice thing to do. Nonprofits, large nonprofits, I think need to be encouraged to move into a worker self-directed initiative. I myself was actually called into an office and reprimanded by my CEO for participating in working class, self-determinated organizational organizing through a mutual aid based perspective. That was incredibly jarring for me. I actually quit my job 2 weeks later because I know that being able to fold myself into becoming a full-time organizer, to be able to appear on platforms like this and to dig into the community. Actually, in 20 minutes, I'm going to be unloading food at a food pantry and working at it tomorrow. And at the moment, we have people out running deliveries right now. There's a lot of things that need to be done on the ground, and I knew that my time and energy would be not only more well spent, but more well received and appreciated if I was immersed among the people and not working in a large nonprofit where my work was being seen as a threat to the hegemony of a nonprofit that was hoping to centralize and seize power for itself instead of for the people. So I really want to encourage people to think about power and how it affects people, specifically people of marginalized backgrounds, and recognize, as Buenaventura Durruti said during the Spanish Civil War, that although we live in ruins, the world that we have here in our hearts is growing at this very minute, and we are not in the least afraid of ruins because that world is growing right here and now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Payton. There was a lot of appreciation for the resource guide that you had compiled, as well as the examples of mutual aid and what the opportunities are. There were a couple of questions that came up. We'll try to get to them in the Q&A, but I'm just realizing we're moving closer towards our time. I want to go over to our last speaker, Lori, who, if you would just kind of share some of your thoughts around, the fear that may be holding some people back from, in terms of moving towards like this new world, or kind of like what it takes to get there, whether it's fear or the acts of courage, or just what that process may look like.
Okay, thank you. It's not easy to go on after Payton, but I will do my best. It's true that in response to your inviting me to speak today, I went immediately to the tension that I feel within me and how it is impacted by my own fears and then fears that are being imposed on me by the outside world. And it really struck me that fear is so paralyzing and almost functions as a prison, blocking out light, blocking out the ability to see broadly and widely. And it's the biggest impediment to hope. And it brought me to a place of realizing that if I allowed my fears that are generated from uncertainty and the overwhelming number of questions that exist in our chat box, that exist in all of our minds and hearts, that I would not be able to go forward in a revolutionary way and to change what is normal. And I see returning as an opportunity to do that. And in thinking about where I could find guidance on how to be a revolutionary, besides Payton, of course, I followed Payton's suggestion to revisit Gracely Boggs, a very small Asian woman who lived to the age of 100, and John Powell, who is a very tall Black man who is the director of the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society. So an academician and a thinker and theoretician and an on-the-ground labor organizer and revolutionary change maker. And what they both instilled me with and underscored is what I already know, that as human beings, we all long for a sense of belonging. And that what I see that COVID-19 has unveiled so starkly is the othering that takes place in our society and in our world. And personally today, I speak and walk in the world as an Asian person. And of late, I have to ask myself if I'm going to be viewed as a disease carrier, if I will ever be seen as American or always foreign, if I'll be blamed for the Asian carp invasion, for the recent Japanese monster hornet, for the well-being of the American car industry. Will I become an enemy again? Because this pandemic has been compared to the bombing of Pearl Harbor and 9/11 as well. So although none of these things have legitimacy, they are present in me. And I think that any of us who have been ever targeted or profiled or stereotyped or sidelined or dismissed understand that experience of being othered and the need for belonging. And so I go to what my beautiful comrades on this panel have emphasized, which are compassion, relationships, and liberation. And I am reminded of how important it is that I recognize that I'm not alone in this and that I must work more intently on building new relationships in this work, in listening to all points of view, in respecting and sharing in the feelings of others, and in community, acknowledging my fears, shared fears, my outrage, shared outrage, and working through that to find inspiration and hope in each other. When I allow the fear to take over, I'm giving up my power. And I want to reclaim my power. I want to grow. I want to build a spiritual framework for our everyday lives, because I believe that together we can upend what is wrong and we can replace what is wrong, not as subversives, but with the human qualities of social responsibility and creativity. Those are the words of Grace Lee Boggs. So in order to make positive change, whatever that will be, in every small and large attempt, I believe it starts with a willingness and an ability to vision, both personally and collectively. And in order to do that, I have to be released from my fear. I need to start with self-transformation and my own vision for change and my own hope. And then I need to share that vision with others. And together we will revolutionize our normal. I only believe that it is our visions and our allyship that will equip us to be transformative change makers. And this is how I think we will reach what Dr. King mandated for us, which is our beloved community. The King Center describes beloved community as a global vision in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced in an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood and non-binary allyship. I guess my three asks for everyone here, and I am so grateful for this shared space, because this is the model of what we need to go forward, is to please make room for the outrage and the fear and the hopelessness, but please do not let it obscure what has to be illuminated and where the laser sharp focus needs to be. The second would be to receive that discomfort and uncertainty so that that imbalance can produce the new equilibrium. And the third would be to seek out every relationship in search of answers and allow our generative power from our collective and our interdependence and our love for each other to fuel our liberation. That's it.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I'm still processing. Yodit, do you want to jump in and bring it? Yeah, just.
Yeah. I feel like we have all heard what we needed to hear in this moment. There was one person, Joni, that had a question, and I just want to ask her permission to maybe follow up on that offline, and just allow us to come to the end of this session being nourished by our panelists. Maybe even you can slide to the next slide, Mel. To thank Lori, Payton, LaRon, and Mo for breathing into us. I think the energy we all are just thirsting for right now, and the challenge to not only not return to a new normal, but to be reminded that we are actually claiming a normal that existed for Indigenous brothers and sisters and in many of the lands across this country before colonialism, before dominant culture. So I think we should wrap up. If you want to close us out, but I just want to send you and Ananya my deepest appreciation for pulling this together, and our speakers. I feel like I'm so full I could cry. So thank you.
Yeah, so just, thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you for those who are joining. Just a quick reminder, we do have 2 other future conversations planned. Next one's May 22nd. And again, if there is an evaluation form that will be dropped in the chat box, but if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at info@new.org. If you want to connect directly with the panelists, if you send us an email to that address, we'll then forward it on so you can be connected. But thank you so much to the panelists, to the attendees, to our partners who made this work possible.
Yeah, and so Payton just asked, and we will absolutely keep this line open if people want to stay on to dialogue a little bit more. And I just want to ask you all, I know you're all busy and you got to go on, but if you could give us feedback in the survey, we'll send it out to you, but it really helps us to shape our work. And we want to do that with you, not for you. So please take a moment to do that. And those who would like to stay on, and I don't know if our speakers can or would like to, we're happy to hold this space for continued discussion. I think can we go until 1:30 or so, Mel, or do we have?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, so those of you who need to leave, absolutely.
Yeah.
And those who can stay, yeah. It seems to be someone was having an issue with the eval link, but we'll double check it to make sure it's the right link that's being shared. But yeah, those of you who wish to engage in conversation, let's dive in.
Yeah, Ananya, I think you're repurposing the eval link, and folks that already completed it will not need to. So we'll have to generate a new one and get that out.
Yeah, any questions or comments for the panelists, for those who are able to stay?
And will you unmute people?
Yes. I don't know how to do that.
That's me.
I'm trying to get back to, I don't know if Joni is still on, but she had a question for Payton, and if we're still recording, and his response will get on there.
Yeah, there was a question. Well, there was a question around how mutual aid mutual aid programs can be leveraged for people who,
with COVID.
maybe, related to COVID.
There it goes. Is there a mutual aid approach to caring for community members with COVID, Payton?
Yeah, I think that's a really amazing question, first and foremost. There is in my list of resources, a link that I believe is just titled, let's see here, a list of mutual aid groups and resources from around the country. That's a list that was compiled by It's Going Down. It's a revolutionary organization, and those are a link to different groups, as well as mutual aid like neighborhood potting or care and support-based models that exist that a lot of us are using around the country and around the world right now to support people practically. The people in my community right now, I sympathize with Laron. No one that I personally know has been a confirmed COVID case. I do have a few nurses in my life who have gotten sick, but weren't tested and confirmed COVID. But in those instances, what happened was the entire household was put on lockdown, and people were supporting them from afar. People with immunocompromisation obviously need a little bit more support than others. But having a contingency plan in place first is the most successful model that I've seen for people in my own community who have had the scares, and people that I've read about and interfaced with at a distance. So having that plan in place, what does it look like to have a single roommate? What does it look like if you're living like myself in a collective house that has 7 people living in it? How do you navigate what it looks like to have just a single person who's living on their own and you want to support them? These are all questions that I think you need to talk about with the people around you and ask specifically what it looks like to receive care from the people that you're around. I know in my household right now, we've created our closed loops. We don't see people outside of the people that we're directly interfacing with every day. That's the people we live with and a couple select people around us. And anyone else that we interface with, if we're going to the grocery store, working at a pantry, we're wearing PPE and we're keeping 6-foot distance. So we're eliminating our risk of exposure that way. So within our closed loop, asking the question like, what kind of support can I actually give you and what do you actually want from me? Because I'm not going to assume that I will be your primary caretaker and do everything for you, because you might not even want me to care for you. Maybe you want your mom to take care of you, and unfortunately you can't see your mom right now. So what does that look like and feel like for you? Asking people what dignified care looks like, I think, is always the best approach. I don't think there's any hard or fast rules or like methodologies for caring for people that have been confirmed COVID, because everyone's going to be affected by it differently. Some people are, once again, immunocompromised or already at risk, and some people are going to be able to have it, stay quarantined for a week or two, and get over it relatively easily. So I don't want to speak too much more to that. I do think that at the helm of all of that is dignity and cooperation, instead of like treating people like they're your patient. You know, they're your friend. Treat them like that.
Sure. And Lori, there was thank you for that, Payton. There was, as you were talking, can you talk a little bit more, as you started to talk about like the revolution that's at hand, can you talk about like what, you know, that may look like, or, you know, how do we get to that point of you know, starting to have those like revolutionary thoughts, or, you know, anything along those lines, just to build upon what you were sharing earlier?
I want to admit that revolution is a word that really scared me initially. And then as I came to understand that it starts within me, it became more comfortable and then eventually absolutely necessary. So I think it's possibly, you know, the equivalent of transformation with a little more force behind it, in the sense that it is a distancing from what has been and the context that is known, and venturing into an unknown and new place. And that can only be imagined and visualized through a vision of what I yearn for, what I dream about, and then it's enhanced and it's fortified by joining with others who share that common desire to go forward in that way. So for me, there is no guide or no prescription for revolution, as much as it involves really deeply knowing what my values are, what I am going to decide, as Laurent so, put it in such stark terms, how far am I willing to go and what am I willing to give up in order to truly actualize what's imperative. And I think that is similar, it's a similar model to most things, I think, and that is that it all has to start with each individual internally making the commitment, making the change, understanding myself in order to go forward out into the world, and then to become systemic.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lori. Yeah, and I think it's good to know that it starts with the individual before you can move to make movements beyond that. And so having that understanding that it has to start with yourself and the thoughts that are there. As we're moving towards like wrapping up, I just want to give a chance to Mo to see if you had any closing thoughts that you wanted to offer with the group, and then Laurent.
Just a couple of first apologies for my sound quality, and I don't know if this is coming through okay or not, but apologies for the previous sound quality. Hopefully you caught at least some parts of it, and I'm happy to share my notes or talk to anybody who would like to. Also, I think Payton, you're still there. I have no, like they say, dog in the hunt or whatever. I don't know what the saying is about conscious capitalism. I'm sure there's my branding, and maybe it's the word capitalism, but it's about compassion and being conscientious and doing the right things. I know the models are not perfect, and that was my main point, which is to everyone who's still on, that we can't just pick up where we drop from, and the democracies and the capitalists and other systems, socialists, etc., are all have flaws, and we really need to understand what is what makes the right sense for ourselves personally. Like they say, put on your own oxygen mask first, and then try to fix the plane you're flying on. So I absolutely don't purport to know if that is the right answer or not for any situation at all, but it was one definitely a step further along the dimension that I'd like people and myself, sure, think of around being compassionate and conscientious.
Thank you, Mo. Hop over to Laurent. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, first of all, thank you all, everybody, for participating, for the guests who participated, who are still here. One of the things I really appreciate about this kind of thing is that we've got a dynamic, a group dynamic going here, and that it's possible to both feed off of and learn from the ideas of others. I see this as a building process. One of the distinctions that I personally make about revolution is, and I like it that you compared it to transformation, Lori, because I think of a revolution as a complete transformation away from, let me put it this way, towards something new. I always distinguish between what I see so much activity being mounted around rebellion, rebelling against what used to be, rather than creating something new. So this step on the process of being able to envision the new, of being able to distinguish our best ideas as we go forward, I think is tremendously important. So I'm glad to feel myself to be in the process of creating transformation and revolution. And I'm always, always, always grateful for an opportunity to interact with my Leaders of Color Forum. What would be the word? Compadres.
That works.
So thank you all very much.
No worries. So for any final questions from those who are on the line, who've stuck around, just want to provide an opportunity if there's anything you would like to ask or comments or anything like that. Going once, twice. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you again to the panelists. Thank you for the stories and perspective that was shared. Thanks to Ananya and Yodit for helping this run smoothly. And we'll see you all again in 2 weeks to further the conversation. Thanks so much. Be well, be safe, be healthy.
Hey, was